Theresa May is not somebody I particularly warm to at all, though I must say I've I've come to a sort of I've revised some of my opinions since her resignation, and she was particularly fine when she was uh, poking Boris Johnson in the back when Boris was Prime Minister. But nevertheless, in the often cynical and convoluted world of British politics, true legislative legacies are rare, and Theresa May, for all her political missteps, and I think there are many, from her robotic campaign to the Brexit labyrinth, to her hostile environment when she was Home Office Minister for so long, didn't leave behind one clear and commendable achievement. Except in the case of Theresa May, the 2015 Modern Slavery Act. It was and it still is one of the first comprehensive frameworks in the world to tackle forced labour, trafficking and slavery within both the UK borders and corporate supply chains. But 10 years on, and in the hands of a Labour government keen to project moral leadership while balancing fiscal constraints, while balancing the books, this legacy is under quiet and serious threat. And as the Home Secretary and then Prime Minister, Theresa May made the fight against modern slavery a cornerstone of her public persona. The Modern Slavery Act consolidated fragmented criminal laws and introduced mandatory transparency rules. Any company with a turnover above £36 million had to report how it was combating slavery in its supply chains. And it created the Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner and allowed law enforcement to seize the assets of traffickers. For once, rhetoric about world-leading action was justified, and May took it to the UN General Assembly, and even now leads the Global Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking, telling world leaders that no country is immune. Sir Keir Starmer's government has, publicly at least, echoed May's moral stance. Ed Miliband's pledge that GB Energy will not fund projects involving Chinese forced labour, for example, is one such instance. But these promises are beginning to ring hollow. Funding for the supporting global action to end modern slavery programme has dried up, and its successor programme has had its budget slashed by nearly 90%, and the government has yet to appoint a new modern slavery envoy. And in other words, there are currently no active UK-funded and international programmes tackling modern slavery at all at its source. We are, as Labour MP Sarah Champion starkly warns, at risk of becoming a dumping ground for slave-made goods, cheap clothes. The justification for these cuts is that Britain must prioritise defence spending in an increasingly volatile world, but this could be a false economy. Modern slavery is not just a moral outrage, it's a threat multiplier. It destabilises economies, it fuels conflict, it encourages mass migration and distorts international markets. As May herself has said, slavery distorts competition. If British firms are held to account while others aren't, we surrender both our values and our market advantage. So why has this happened? As May pointed out at Davos and on Women's Hour, slavery is out of sight and out of mind. It competes with climate change, COVID recovery, and wars in Ukraine and Gaza for airtime. But the numbers are sobering. 50 million people globally are estimated to be enslaved today, more than ever before. And meanwhile, convictions remain abysmally low. Between 2017 and 2019, only 64 people were sentenced for slavery-related crimes in the UK, out of more than 22,000 identified victims. Let's not pretend the Act was ever perfect. There are no penalties for non-compliance with corporate transparency rules. The support system for victims is creaking and discredited. May's own hostile environment policies inadvertently made victims less likely to come forward. And now the weakening of the Act's international arm undermines its preventative power. It ignores the fundamental truth that slavery is transnational, and if we do not tackle it there, we cannot control it here. What's needed? Well, there are three things that are needed. Number one, to restore funding for overseas anti-slavery programs. Number two, to reappoint a modern slavery envoy, a senior diplomat with teeth. The role has been empty since January. Number three, to embed mandatory human rights due diligence in all UK-bound supply chains with penalties attached. Theresa May called modern slavery the greatest human rights issue of our time, and she wasn't exaggerating. And yet, her one noble legacy is now decaying through neglect, political forgetfulness, and budgetary sleight of hand. And of course, her own stupidity with the hostile environment. If this government wishes to claim the mantle of ethical leadership, it must do more than grandstand about solar panels and supply chain ethics. It must restore real funding, real diplomacy, real law. To paraphrase survivor Nasreen Sheikh, if it contains slavery, we don't want to consume it. Nor should we consume the illusion that modern slavery is someone else's problem. Because if we do, frankly, we're complicit.